tensions remain high nationwide following the second fatal shooting of an American citizen by federal officers in Minneapolis over the weekend. As we have reported, Alex Preddy was a registered nurse who worked at a Veterans Affairs hospital in Minneapolis. He was shot and killed by federal agents early on Saturday. Here in New York City, hundreds braved the cold on Saturday to protest Alex Preddy's death and ICE's aggressive tactics. And of course, in the 5 boroughs, federal ICE agents continue to target undocumented immigrants, including many who have pending asylum claims. Mayor Mamdani has vowed to do everything in his power to prevent what he calls horrific actions by federal immigration officers here in New York. Joining me now to talk about where things stand is Professor Elora Mukherjee. She is a law professor and the director of Columbia Law School's Immigrants' Rights Clinic. Good to see you, Professor. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me on.
My first question, do armed and masked ICE agents have the legal authority to stop anybody they want in a public place and demand proof of citizenship?
Absolutely not. The Fourth Amendment applies to all people on U.S. soil, and that requires a prohibition on unreasonable searches and seizures. This means, according to Supreme Court doctrine, that race, ethnicity must not be used as a factor in conducting immigration enforcement, because that would be violating the law. But this has been complicated by the Supreme Court's opinion in a case called Perdomo Vasquez versus Nome, which was issued in September 2025. In that case, a lower court judge in Los Angeles had prohibited federal law enforcement officers from using apparent race, ethnicity, whether a person speaks Spanish or English with an accent, and several other factors as being factors in whether or not immigration officers conduct stops. And the Supreme Court lifted that prohibition that the federal district court judge had issued. And as a result, Justice Kavanaugh issued a concurring opinion which seemed to allow racial profiling in immigration enforcement. Justice Kavanaugh has since backed away from that opinion in a footnote that was issued in an opinion in December. So the Supreme Court case is clear. You should not be using racial profiling in conducting immigration enforcement. But what we're seeing across the country every day is that federal officers are in fact using race and ethnicity in carrying out stops.
On a related note, the White House has announced that all green cards granted to people from 19 different countries will be re-examined. They also announced a halt to the processing of green card and naturalization applications from the citizens of those same 19 countries. What has that meant for your clients?
It's had a devastating impact on the clients I represent from countries around the world. These are individuals who have done everything right. They are in the process of becoming U.S. citizens. They have no criminal histories. They have fled horrific violence and are trying to build lives here in the United States. And the Trump administration's recent pause, as you described, has put their lives on hold indefinitely. Now they are fearful every day. Will I be arrested? Will I be detained? Will I be deported to a country that I fled because horrible things have happened to me there? And it has instilled fear in nationals, not just from these 19 countries, but from other countries as well.
You and other immigration attorneys have explained on Spectrum News that these people who are applying for asylum are not, quote, illegals. They are lawfully present as they wait for their claims to be heard. But we've seen multiple stories of applicants being detained, flown out of the country, thrown in jail, either improperly or even mistakenly. What is the remedy for that? Are there going to be civil suits filed?
It has been an extraordinarily difficult time for many asylum seekers and others seeking humanitarian relief in the United States. As we saw with 5-year-old Liam Conejo Ramos, who was arrested last week with his father, even children and parents are being taken and detained at a family detention center in Dilley, Texas. Over the past year, there have been thousands of children, more than 3,800 children, who have been arrested and detained by federal law enforcement officers. And what we're trying to do on behalf of these children, these families, these individuals who are wrongly arrested and detained is first try to help them with their immigration applications and try and get those immigration applications approved. And second, where it's possible, lawyers are trying to file federal habeas petitions to get people out of detention. And according to a Politico analysis from earlier this month, in more than 1,600 cases, federal judges have ruled against the administration and have ordered the release of non-citizens who were wrongly detained and arrested. So there is overwhelming case law telling the executive branch not to wrongly arrest and detain people, but the executive branch is doing this every day.
Journalists and citizens, especially activists, are taught that recording law enforcement as they do their work in public is legal and is not grounds to be beaten or tear gassed or shot to death or anything like that. But we've seen that happen over and over again. Have the rules changed, or is this another category of the federal government just kind of doing what it wants in contravention of clear court rulings?
The rules haven't changed. The First Amendment protects peaceful protesters and protects the rights of people to observe what is happening in public, to record that, to document that, and to distribute and investigate that. The executive branch in this area and in so many others that touch on immigration is far overstepping its authority that is set up by the U.S. Constitution. The U.S. Constitution sets up a system of checks and balances, and the executive branch is overreaching that authority every day. And nowhere are we seeing those excesses more than in the immigration space.
We have reported on, and I've certainly seen over the years, what's called a foot race to the courthouse, that two sides have a constitutional claim, they bring it to court, the court decides it. This seems to be a little bit different, where the federal government knows it's not going to win, or even if there are intermediate rulings that don't go its way, they just continue barreling down the same path. Where is this going to lead?
Eventually, these issues will reach the Supreme Court, and the law is clear, the Constitution is clear. The First Amendment protects the right of all people to engage in peaceful protest. This applies to people regardless of their immigration status. All people on U.S. soil have a right to due process. That due process applies regardless of one's citizenship or immigration status. No one may be summarily detained and deported from the United States because they're out there peacefully protesting and expressing viewpoints that the executive branch doesn't agree with. And everyone on U.S. soil, regardless of U.S. citizenship status or not, has a right to remain silent when they're being interrogated by any law enforcement officers.
So we have a real stress test of the courts and of the Constitution. Is it going to be up to the political branch ultimately to resolve this, do you think?
It will be up to the political branch, but more importantly, it's up to the American people. It is what we, the people, do in this moment that will determine the future of our country. Are we going to be a country that slips day by day closer and closer to an authoritarian state? Or are we a democracy where the views of people nationwide are being taken into account? Across party lines, Americans are overwhelmingly concerned that the executive branch is overreaching, is pushing too far in its immigration crackdown. And there are other signs that Americans are not happy with what the executive branch is doing right now on various measures. So the midterm elections are coming up. And in the meantime, people should be out there peacefully protesting and making their views known.
Okay, we're going to leave it there for now. A lot of food for thought there. Thank you very much, Professor Mukherjee.
Thank you for having me.